Hey, sweet people, welcome to the Sweetspot Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Süß, and today, once again, we're gonna dive into the world of brand building and strategic storytelling. My guest today is gonna take us on a deep dive into the world of brand storytelling and audio brand building with podcasts. My guest is Nikita Kumar. She has a profound understanding on how to craft engaging podcast narratives that captivate an audience and elevate your brand. With her experience, she shares her secrets to successful podcasting and provide a lot of valuable insight that you don't want to miss. In this episode, Harnessing Podcast Power, we will explore how to create compelling content that resonates with your listeners and also strengthens your brand identity. Whether you're a podcast host, content creator, or a brand manager, this episode is packed actionable tips and strategies on how to enhance your brand podcasting efforts. So without further ado, please welcome Nikita to the show and let's dive into the world of brand podcasting.
Welcome to the Sweet Side. This is the Sweetspot Podcast with Marc Süß, investigating entrepreneurship, purpose, and the creative life.
Well, sweet people, welcome with me to the show, Nikita. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for joining us. You're joining us from London, UK. How's everything?
It is, the weather is up and down, which I'm sure everyone is tired of hearing about by now.
Well, that's fine.
But apart from that, it's good. It's nice. It's very bustling and busy as always.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm a bit jealous of London. It's a fantastic, amazing town. Really, really, really good. Independent of the weather. Never mind the weather if you're in that city, right?
Of
That's
course.
really cool. Well, sweet people, as you're probably seeing right now, we're not doing video today, but you can even better focus on the content audio, right? Okay. So what you don't see is we just had a little pre-talk and Nikita told me that she bought the headset she's recording with just not so long ago without knowing if you ever need the actual microphone or not. So I wondered, did you imagine, because I what came to my head was there are some tokens you get or some objects that have sort of a radiation or that have some sort of foreshadowing maybe. Sometimes you buy a mic and then lo and behold, a couple of months later, you're going to need it because you're asked about an interview. And I think this is one of the occasions. Did you buy it with maybe I'm going to do an interview, or what was the thought behind this microphone?
Well, when I started at this company, I did think to myself, I'll probably, it's a podcast. It is a podcast company. It's in the podcast industry. I didn't ever imagine myself actually speaking on a podcast. Maybe it was a distant, dream that maybe one day.
Awesome.
But no, I didn't imagine that. I just thought, let me try and be a little bit more closer to these. I joined the calls and everyone had these professional podcast microphones in front of them. I thought to myself, okay, I can't be using AirPods. Let me get a mic.
That's cool. Yeah. You don't have one of these old rundown stage mics like I have for traveling.
I see.
Yeah, it's back from the days of music, actually. It's a singing microphone. It's good quality, but it's one of these handheld things that you look like a TV presenter.
More authentic. I like it.
Well,
it's different.
kind of.
This I haven't seen before.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's one of these rock and roll classics from Shure. It's just the most common microphone in the world, I think. But yeah, it's not ideal for podcasting because I basically only have one free hand, which the audience is not going to notice today. Perfect. So you just mentioned it. You are today working as a podcast specialist. What that means in detail, we're going to dive into later. But I really, as always, want to go back in time a little bit. And I'm really interested in how this passion for, well, whatever it is, listening to people, talking to people, conversation in general, how this originally started. Do you remember?
I do. I remember it really well because it was something that I just kind of stumbled across. but it fit me perfectly. So I had been in sales for about 5, 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's nothing like podcasting,
That's right.
except from how much conversation you have in a
Mm-hmm.
role like that. And I've always been someone, as you'll learn after this hour, I'm sure, I've always been someone who enjoys conversations. I like
Mm-hmm.
communicating with people. So, and I've always listened to podcasts, but for some reason, I thought that it was always just someone, at home
Mm-hmm.
recording themselves with a mic and publishing it. And that was it. Like I
They
didn't
really are radio star.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really didn't know that it was such a massive industry until I saw um, a role. I'd been looking for a job for once that I enjoyed with my whole heart. And then I saw a little role and it said something like business development dash podcasts. And I thought, oh, this is different. I didn't
It's a
even know that
thing. Yeah.
there was, a podcast industry out there
Yeah.
for some
Yeah.
reason.
Yeah.
Even though I listen to them every day myself. And then I thought to myself, this could be good because I like talking, I like conversations, I like listening to people talk, I love podcasts, and I thought, let me try. And then I started and I realized that's something that actually really fits me really well. And then it honestly shocked me how I didn't even know that the podcast industry is this massive and it's this popular. For some reason, before I came into the business side of it, I thought maybe it's just me, but no, it really is everyone.
100%. And I remember, I don't know, in London, it's probably been a bit early, a bit more progressive. But in Germany, up until I think 3 or 4 years ago, everyone was like, oh, you do a podcast, another podcast. Who needs that? And I'm like, what who says that about books or TV shows, man? This is some form of entertainment. Embrace everything new. It's crazy, but yeah, it's a huge industry now. You just talked about the shows you started with and enjoyed. What's your daily or at least weekly shows you listen to? What are your personal favorite podcasts?
I really love the, I guess, I love any show about the human brain. So my favorite show is, I'm not sure if you've heard of it. Many people haven't, but it's called Hidden Brain. It's actually quite popular.
Cool. I don't know that yet.
Yeah, it's kind of a psychology podcast, and each episode is about a different, cognitive processing. Gosh, I should know the terms by now. But each one is about something different. Yeah, it just teaches you more about yourself and other people, everyone around you, and it's really interesting. Those are my favorite.
That's
anything
cool.
about the brain.
Hidden Brain. That's on my list. I mean, I know the feeling, but I never heard the podcast.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. They're really interesting ones, honestly. They are more on the educational side, but it's teaching you about, people and yourself, humans.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really into conversations of between creative people. So, of course, my favorite right now is the Tetragrammaton podcast by Rick Rubin. Famous music producer from Run DMC to Slayer. He did everything, and he is such an inspiring, calm, meditative guy with such a vibrant energy, but very, very meditative.
It's the voice.
100%. Yeah, he's a brilliant podcast. The last episode I listened to was with the other brilliant guy, Nick Cave. So this is my conversation. If you're into my favorite podcast, if you're into creative conversations, let's put it that way.
I will definitely give it a listen. I've heard of it, but I haven't listened to it.
Well, Nikita, to prepare for our talk, I checked out your LinkedIn profile, which is probably attached in the show notes of this show. If you sweet people want to connect or ask Nikita anything. And I saw that pretty early on in your career, if I'm not mistaken, I think you started working with children. And I wondered if this had some kind of impact on your conversation skills or on the way you approach conversation in general. Is this something that you think back to today sometimes? Is this something you still have takeaways and learnings from?
100%. Since I was very young, I have quite a big family. So and we're all different ages as well. So since I was a child myself, I have had loads of nieces and nephews around me
Mhm.
constantly. And then I guess that's what spurred me into, from the age of 16 throughout education, I'd been working in a nursery until the point where I left university.
Mhm.
So years of my life that I've spent with children. And when you speak to kids and toddlers in particular, it's a different type of communication and learning how to really get your point across,
Mhm.
how to make someone understand something in the best way possible. And it's actually a lot of one-sided communication as well, because
Yeah.
often at certain ages they can't really talk. So you're just talking to them constantly about different things. And um, I think because that then led on to me being at home by myself and talking to myself. And I realized very early on that um, conversation and interacting through all of that as well, I realized early on how important it is, how impactful it is, and how much words actually mean,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, especially through that being around children a lot and speaking. The only thing that you can really do with children, apart from, playing games, which you're not constantly going to be on your feet because
Mhm.
we don't have
Yeah.
the same energy as them,
Yeah, 100%.
is the conversation. So
Mhm.
yeah, it started my love for talking to people, and they're so interesting.
Yeah.
They're so interesting as well, the things that they come up with. And yeah, I loved
Yeah,
it.
and the way they I mean, this is pretty close to home because whenever I do creative work myself or I host creative workshops or whatever, it's always circling back to what would children do? What would yourself, your inner child, or yourself as a child, if you can remember, what would you do? How would you approach this? Because so much of what's considered thinking outside the box, maybe
Hmm.
for a meeting, ideation session, even a conversation you're having for your company or for something else, is yet breaking the boundaries of your comfort zone and thinking outside the box or approaching it a different way as you would in everyday life. Um, the simplest thing is you're a specialist for something. Now you maybe go on air in an interview, in a podcast, something you have to totally approach it differently, not from your everyday perspective, right? You can't use expert terms. You can't use your company slang. No one's gonna get it. So you have to step into different pair of shoes or look at it from a very different angle and then approach it and also verbalize it from a very different standpoint. So I think it's a head start if you have experience a lot with children and talking to them. And
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
I don't
It
know if this.
makes every conversation, no matter who they are, how difficult or challenging that
Mhm.
person is, or different, I should say, instead of difficult.
Yeah,
Um, how different that person is, it makes the conversation easier, because if you can
100%.
handle a conversation with a 2-year-old for hours on end.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I mean, there's the saying in German, if you prepare presentations or anything, make it so management and little kids will
Yeah.
understand it. And there is a big it's not completely wrong, right?
Mhm.
It's you can
No.
compare it. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I get
definitely.
it.
I see
Yeah,
why.
100%. Oh, that's cool. Well, but we talked a lot about. I think we should get to your job because I have a lot of questions circling around podcasts for companies and everything. So maybe you can explain us a little bit how your everyday job looks like today and what the quote unquote sweet spot that we always look for in here, what the sweet spot of your job is.
So my everyday role is, well, there's about maybe 1 or 2 hours that will be the same every day, more or
Mhm.
less. And then the rest of the day is usually completely different every day, which I love.
Okay, cool. That's
Um,
sounds good.
so I manage a team. I lead a team a very creative team that helps corporates build their own podcast.
Mhm.
So we're a production agency, and we produce branded podcasts. And that's what I'll do for a lot of my day. And then the rest of it, I will be coming up with new ideas and setting up new projects and ways to basically educate the public on the power of podcasting.
Yeah. Oh, it's two-sided. Cool. So you're in the production. What role do you play in the production process? Are you more ideation, concept? Are you co-recording? Where are you?
So I am operational management. So just making sure that the production process is easy for our clients and we're efficiently helping them produce and grow their branded podcasts.
Awesome.
So yeah, there's lots of people within our team who are doing some of the, content creation themselves in terms of the social asset shareables, and we have editors and engineers, and I'm helping it come together smoothly and run efficiently.
Yeah, a very, very important job, actually. Really cool. Okay, and you just said you focus on corporate podcasts, meaning the companies probably have a certain size.
Yes.
So what kind of companies do you work with?
So we work with quite big asset management and financial services companies at the moment. That is what most of our client base is. They are very large companies. So within each one of them, they have around maybe 10, 15 podcasts themselves.
Wow.
Within that one company. But we are in the process of actually opening that up to smaller, maybe small to medium enterprises that need help, because I think because we have that experience with these large corporations, it'd be really easy for us to help the smaller ones, set up to becoming big audiences like the corporates have.
Really cool. So maybe we should start at the very beginning. Everyone listening, maybe even enjoying some podcasts, but never thought of, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. I have my own thing going. Why shouldn't I do a podcast? So what do you say? What's the pros? Where's the opportunity for companies to get into the game? Because podcasts are, I think, oftentimes perceived from the outset as a form of entertainment. And there are companies that are completely unassociated with being entertaining or entertainers, so to speak. So where's a good starting point? What's in it for them?
I would say that it really depends on, well, first, it depends on your personal level of expertise in whatever it is that you specialize in. So if you consider yourself an expert already, and this is something that you could think to yourself, you know what, I could talk about this for 24 hours by myself with no break, then I would say podcast hosting is for you. However, if you think to yourself, you know what, I'm not sure where I would start, or I'm not sure exactly what I would say, or am I really an expert yet? I'm not sure. If you're a bit, worried to dive in completely, because that is what podcast hosting is. You need to know how to be a very good swimmer in order to dive in like that. Yeah. But if you're not sure and you just want to dip your toe in the water, I would suggest doing what I'm doing right now, which is guesting on podcasts and really refining your narrative, or what story it is that you would want to bring across in that podcast show. We do actually have a podcast guesting service. So we have service for hosts and we have service for guests, because we know that in this industry, there is people on both sides of that fence. They're maybe not ready to completely, or maybe don't even have enough time, and don't want to have a podcast, and they just want to build awareness around their topic and grow their personal brand. Whereas if it's your company and it's your actual brand that you want to grow rather than your own personal one, then I would say podcast hosting is the right way to go with that.
Yeah. Well, that's a good topic you're heading towards. Maybe we can dive into the process, because what you just mentioned is, I think, a really one of the first big questions. Maybe, okay, I'm a company. You convinced me. That sounds nice. Let's do a podcast. Well, how do I start? Where do I start? And also, I mean, there are a lot of style choices and a lot of choices in terms of narrative. What's my company voice gonna be out there in the world as a we talk about AI later, as a human voice, so to speak. So I think this is like one of the first. I don't know. It's one of the first questions. That's one of
Yeah.
mine first ones, I think. Yeah. So how
Yeah.
do you approach that? Who's the voice of a company, of a big company, let's say?
Well, it really depends on the way that it works best is it needs to come from it needs to come from you yourself. We can't give you the answers because we don't know what your exact goals are, what you know best to speak about. We don't know what your content, what you're most comfortable with. So what we'd do is we'd first have a session with you deciding. We'd obviously do an initial consultation to decide whether this is what you actually want to do and you are at a stage where it is something that you would keep up and continue staying motivated with, because as much as we can motivate you, it needs to come from yourself. So after that, then we'll ask you more so, what are your goals? Who is your target audience? And what kind of content are you comfortable with creating? How much time do you have? And depending on all of those things, depending on what your answer is to each of those things, we'll then decide, because podcasts come in so many shapes and sizes. There's no one size fits all answer to that. So it's really dependent on, what your personal goals are. And then we can let you know based off of the data that we have from our own clients and working on 1,000+ podcast episodes, and as well as public data and the statistics that we know of from being in this industry and our personal knowledge. We can then decide what would be the best for you. But it's really, really difficult to answer that one. I do get that question a lot, and it's really difficult unless you know that particular company, because it's not one kind of, if it was, for example, marketing, there's not one way that works for every single company. It completely depends
100%.
on what you're doing.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe we can translate it into an analogy that you use yourself on your LinkedIn profile. You put a Shakespeare quote out there: all the world's a stage. So when you compare it to the podcast stages, over, I think, what did you write, 5 million stages or something that are out there. So let's compare a podcast to a stage for your company. How do you set that up? How do you start rehearsals? Like, guide us through a process of maybe you have a client, or in general, how do you work with clients from the first approach? Hey, should I do a podcast, to, I don't know, launch date or something? In rough terms, how's that process looking like?
How it would start is obviously getting to know you as a client, and knowing what you want. Then this is how the stage would be set up, and the show would be, carried out, would basically be per episode. At the beginning, you'd have a storyboarding session, basically like you would if you were going to host a play. You have to all sit together. We'd all sit together in a room. Or just, even if you'd like, yourself, just the actors can be in the room together, and they can be discussing on the basic outline of what that podcast episode will entail, much like me and you did before. We just made sure that we were comfortable with the way the conversation was going to go. So it'd be similar to that. And then we have engineers, and that would be set up. We'd have a mic test as well, make sure that the stage is ready, everything's going to run smoothly. And then you'd go on to the recording session, and you would just have your conversation. I think a lot of people who haven't done it before, we do get some podcasts that are up and running already, so they kind of know how it goes. Don't need as much help from us. But what I do advise to anyone that hasn't done it before, and it is a bit worrying because this is nerve-wracking. It doesn't matter how much you talk. This is different to a lot of what anyone else has done. It's different to even standing on a stage and talking to people. I do say that if you just imagine that you're sitting in a coffee shop having a normal conversation with this person, kind of forget that thousands of people might be listening.
Yeah, that's good advice.
And then you basically you have your outline, you go on, you have the conversation. I think the good thing about it as well is that it can always be edited. Parts can be even re-recorded if that's what you want. But it will be edited out. Any ums or ahs or mistakes that you make, or if you want to even answer something again, then that can be done.
Of course. Yeah.
After that, after you finish your conversation, you're happy with it, then we will, I mean, it's slightly different from that stage analogy I used. I think that works in the beginning when you're thinking of podcasts, but it's more like a movie production where it does get edited to a certain extent, in case you feel like, there's something I missed, because at the end of the day, it's for your audience. You're doing this for your audience as well. You want them to get value out of what you're saying. So it would be edited in a way that doesn't stray from your message, and simply would publish it after that. Once you're happy with it, it would just get published. It's in the public.
Yeah.
I think
out there.
Yeah, the title and description is the only thing in between that. Maybe some social asset shareables, whatever you want to publish to promote your episodes so that more people can see it and listen to that and get those insights from it, then that's just in between. But I think titles and descriptions and those kind of things, it's not very difficult because you have the main piece of content anyway. You can just repurpose that into as many ways for as many platforms as you want.
Yeah. So a bit of podcast nerd talk. How far do you go into coaching people that will be on mic? Do you do like a little speech training, warm up, something? Does it depend on the person? I mean, how far do you go into the process in detail?
Well, not very far, if I'm honest, because if you give someone too much direction, they could be like, oh no, but she said to do this and this and this and this and this, so I need to now make sure I do all of that. And then when it gets to it, they're like,
get what to say. Yeah, 100%.
Who am I? How do I sound like normally? So my advice always stays strong and steady at just be yourself. Yourself is the only person that you can be. If you try and be anything else or do anything other than what you normally are like, it's going to be difficult. However, if there is any advice that I can give, I guess it would be to enunciate.
Awesome. So
don't mumble.
I better not mumble. That's right. If I compare it to project I've done with my clients, whichever platform they choose to approach. A lot of clients, let's say, let's not do podcasts, let's say social network like Instagram or something. I've experienced a lot of smaller to medium-sized companies just starting it from one day to the other. Hey, should we do why not? Let's do an Instagram. And then they bang out pictures for 2 weeks, 2 a day. And then it just stops. Exactly. And it's just this weird place of public shame of, everyone's feeling bad about it. And it's just, so bottom line, what I want to aim at is you need an editorial plan. I mean, I don't know how often you recommend posting podcast episodes, but I mean, you need at least 2 to 4 a month, I would say, weekly, bi-weekly, depending on the company and the topics, basically. But I mean, you need some kind of idea on how to move on to the future. And I'm really interested in how you work with them in terms of editorial planning and content creation and all of that.
Yeah. So we obviously how often you want to release is dependent on your content. It's dependent on how long it is. If it's really, really long, the average person, from what I know, listens to about 7 podcast episodes a week. So the likelihood of you getting into that, especially if you're new and you're just starting, it's relatively low at the beginning because it takes consistency to build an audience. You have to be consistent with it. So starting off when you have lots and lots of content and it's a really long, lengthy podcast episode, a relative amount of work will be put into it and it will be difficult to maintain that, especially if you're so new to it. So I reckon starting slow so that you can get used to it, and then you can build as you become more of an expert in doing that, then you can build it up. So whether that's 2 podcasts a month, that works for you. So every 2 weeks, that works for you, or even once a month at the beginning, because it is this, in order to build your audience, you have to be in this for the long haul. It isn't this is not, depending on what your goals are, obviously I'm going to say this because a lot of people don't want money from this, but it's not a get rich quick scheme. This is not how it works. You have to be consistent with it. So our advice is to really find out, first we find out exactly what their content is, and then we think about logically how much work are they going to have to put in to be able to do this. Will the listeners want to listen to that long of an episode so frequently? What is the content about? Is it based on trends that you can get weekly? Is it a news podcast that you can get daily? We take all that into consideration, then advise them on what we think, but usually it will be either 2 a month or 1 a month, depending on all of that. And then obviously as you get more used to it, you can just build on that and increase it. But definitely, in order to be consistent, especially with something new, you need to start slow. Otherwise you will end up posting every day, and then you'll hit a wall because your ideas will run out. Yeah.
But that's also something that interests me. Before you go live with a podcast premiere for a company, how much content do you plan ahead? For how many episodes do you usually plan ahead?
So it depends on how often they want to release. I'm so sorry that all of my answers come with depend, because it really
that is
depends.
how it works. That's the real life. If we want simple answers, we don't do podcasts. We go on Twitter or something.
Because this is not copied content. You can't do that. But I'd say if you're planning, for example, to release once every 2 weeks, I would say at least 3 episodes.
Okay.
3, or it's quite hard to get people, because once you start, you think, I just want to publish this. So I understand that, which is why I say 3, but best 6. And if you're posting monthly, then I'd say 3 is enough. That's enough time.
Okay, cool.
Gives you enough time.
Yeah.
However,
it's a rule of thumb. It's an estimate for people to have some rough idea of, do we need the whole year planned out? Is it what do I do for Christmas? It's January already. It's like people sometimes tend to
it also depends on how they think as well. Like, what kind of person am I speaking to here? Are they going to be really motivated by the release of this episode and then think, I want to do more? Or are they someone who is quite not nervous about it, but not as confident about diving in like that, and they feel like they need that backup? Or it just depends on who I'm speaking to, really.
100%. Well, patience is something I have to learn. If I had a great conversation, I want to put it out the same night.
That's
no
me.
matter what. I really love it. Yeah. But you know what? Another thing that I'm really interested in, because I have, as I said, with the microphone, I did music for some years. Still do it on the side, but so I'm super into music and thinking of, this is even a creative technique that I do with clients in workshops or something. Even if they don't even have a podcast or videos where they actually need a corporate soundtrack or something, it's it's an exercise I do with them. How does your company or your product or your team, whatever it is, sound? And make it really specific and teach them about major, minor chords, about different instruments, about different genres and everything. And I'm so interested in how you do this. How do you find the theme music for a company podcast?
It is very much, well, I'm not a musician myself. So
okay.
I'm very interested in hearing what you mean by major, minor, and all of that stuff. But it is what you said at the beginning, is how does your company sound to you?
Yeah.
What is the flow of this podcast going to be? Because you don't want, often the music is found and the intro and everything like that is created after the first episode has been recorded. So I can listen to it.
That's good.
And I can think, what is the tempo of this show?
Yeah.
Because I can't put, disco music leading up to a conversation about the conversation about stocks. I don't know. I can't think of a good example here, but you can't have a really really slow build up intro to a podcast host who is full of energy and charisma. Like you can't do that without listening to them. And it's about them as well. Like, what does your brand sound like to you?
Yeah. You definitely take this into your hands as a company, I mean, and really propose things to your clients.
Yeah, we think that we give them advice, much like what I just told you, that it needs to match the flow of the content, and it needs to match the host mainly, because the guest speakers will be different, but the tempo the host is going on and the energy that they have, it needs to match them, because it's their voice that is going to be leading on straight from that intro music.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. So is there an example you can talk about? I don't know how disclosed everything is, but is there a podcast project for a company that was particularly exciting for you or something? Maybe a topic. I can give you an example first, so you have time to think.
Yeah.
So I produced a tiny little, I do it for solopreneurs or very small companies usually. And I sometimes just host things for them, or I help them set up their little podcasts, but really on a small scale. I'm basically focused on brand building and design, and sometimes media production on the side. But one time there was a midwife, and she just got self-employed because she's been within the whole healthcare system in Germany. It's pretty tough to be a midwife, and she always felt like there's more she could give to her clients, and so she she became an entrepreneur basically, and she's a midwife coach, so to speak. So she prepares women who even think about getting pregnant, how they can prepare during the pregnancy, birth, and even later on. So she has a very holistic approach to all of this. And she was a diehard podcast fan. Never knew what to do with it, because she was like, what do I do with that? I mean,
where do I even start?
Exactly. So it was really, and I was very much like, I don't have my own kids. I, of course, never had the experience of being pregnant, giving birth, never witnessed the whole thing. So we were like really diving into it with a lot of conversations. And I think we found for her, very sustainable concept in terms of what all of her clients have in common. They all go through the same cycle biologically. So we kind of aimed for an evergreen podcast. And she just had this 9-month journey, as we called it. So from, hey, congrats, you're pregnant, is the first one, to, hey, week 2 in the daybed, or however it's called in English. She was a German client. So we just produced this cycle of podcasts that you can enter at any time of your pregnancy, and basically then listen to it. Whoever starts or whoever is her new client, they're all at one point at the same stage where she has an episode for. So this is this is one of the projects that I'm pretty happy with, because starting to talk about it, I had no idea where we're going to end up with the mothers. There's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of happiness, there are also personal stories connected to it, but finding something that can be mostly hosted just by her, and that's really kind of an evergreen content that works for her for years to come. with some extras like guided meditations and all that stuff. And that was, for example, a cool project from my experience that I think really turned out differently.
Yeah.
Maybe you did the disco Texas podcast. I don't know.
So it's a difficult one for me here because of the kind of clients that we work with. We
It's okay
do
if you can't
sign things that
disclose things.
we're not allowed to say anything about it because there's a lot of security, privacy guidelines around it. But there have been some really interesting ones, and I wish anytime someone asks me this, I'm like, ugh, I wish I could tell
can't
you.
talk about. Okay,
But
cool.
I can't talk about it.
That's fine. We respect
I have
that.
so many stories in my head.
Yeah.
But like with specific examples to make you feel all the feels of this story.
That's not always possible. We respect that. That's fine. That's okay. But maybe on a more general level, to me there is, and this is something that I really think a lot about in terms of design or brand building, because I think there's always a very deep, whoever you talk to in a company, CEO or janitor, they all come to work if they're happy with their work and they love what they do. They always have some kind of mission or something that drives them, right? So they have their own narrative of why they go to work, what they do, and what they want people to experience from their work. And I think it's sometimes it's a big stretch, sometimes it's pure joy, sometimes it's a pain in the ass to get it out there. So I'm really interested in general and specifically in your role. What's your experience in how to craft engaging narratives, brand narratives for a podcast? Maybe we can talk about this a bit.
So I find that it really depends on what the easiest thing to talk about and the easiest concept to build around is it's different for every company, of course, but the values that your brand, this is the easiest thing to build off of, is starting with the value before coming up with specific content ideas, is starting with the values and the principles that your brand has and what you want to convey. So depending on what that is, it will make it easier for you to see what the kind of flow of your podcast will be that is comfortable to you, that you agree with, that you would like to do. Because, I mean, your values and your principles as a company, and generally values and principles, they're hardly something that you would not enjoy. So it's a good guiding light to start with and bring that motivation from in the general flow of your podcast. And then
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but this is really something that I'm interested in because depending on the size of the company and the people within the company you talk to, there's sometimes, in my experience, a very different understanding of these values. And sometimes they are a label on the wall, especially in huge companies or corporations. And sometimes they're really driven by it and they embody it and they know how to apply a thing like whatever it is, optimism or whatever they're on the chart of the values, right? So how deep do you go into this? Do you sometimes find, no specifics, no names, but do you sometimes find that you have to help your clients to really light them back up, or are they usually professional and well branded enough to really are aware of them?
They are usually aware, I think, because of the size of these companies, they are usually aware. However, obviously in the podcast guesting side, and when we do open up to smaller and medium businesses, even if you don't have that plaster on the wall or that list
horrible
that
posters.
Principles, that principle list 1 to 7, this is what you will do. Like, even if you don't have that, and even if you are the CEO yourself, even the CEO himself will say that this is what it is. This is my intention when I built this company. This is the values that I wanted it to have and the principles that I wanted it to have, because more often than not, I don't think that you build a company without, at least in the start, it was a fleeting thought of
Mm-hmm.
this is the values and the
100%.
principles that I want this company to have. This is the value it's going to bring. So I think once you ask that question, it might not already be in their head, but they'll be able to think of it pretty quickly. Because even me, if I was to think of a podcast that I would start or start for the company, we don't have a sheet anywhere. I'm pretty sure we don't have this word written anywhere actually that I can think of now. But I do know that if I write a post on LinkedIn or I have a conversation with someone, I'll mention trust and I'll mention authenticity. Those are the two words that I know those are the principles of our and the values of our company. So if you have a think of it, for example, what would you say yours are with what you do and what you start?
For the podcast.
Anything and everything that you do.
Well, actually, there are some values that go into everything I do, which are, of course, creativity, collaboration, and optimism. But the way to express them really depends on if I'm doing free artistic work, if I focus more on my design studio here, they find different forms they find different ways of expressing themselves, so to speak. But I think there's a core to it. But I don't know if you can relate to this, but what I found out, what to me was very interesting working with clients and creatives and entrepreneurs from the US and the UK, you are so much better trained when it comes to storytelling and attaching yourself to the business, to really, why am I doing this? What drives me? What are the values attached to it? In my experience, very much. The rest of Europe is, especially in Germany, where I have a lot of clients also, they're very pragmatic, very factual about it. It's logical. A very different approach. It's really hard for them to find an authentic, to quote your value, an authentic connection.
Why do you think that is?
Different upbringing. Well, I have very much episodes where we really go into the difference of storytelling and creativity between the States and also England or the UK and Germany and other countries. We don't have a tradition of storytelling. Like in schools, in class, there's no creative writing. There's no perspective of I find my way. You're always in a very closed. I mean, the upside of Germany is you have a very good social system, social security. You feel a lot of safety, so you don't have to find a path for yourself or define yourself as sharply and early maybe as you need in other cultures. But this also, you later lack that if you're an entrepreneur and really carving out sharp outlines for your company. Now, this is something that I do with nearly all of my clients, which is fine because in Germany, that's how it's done. But we always have to work on the key principles. What's your mission statement? What are your values? Really get them straight and find an image that really brings you joy, that motivates you, that inspires you. Because again, sometimes it's just a couple of words on
a paper.
But I think this is a huge difference, cultural difference. If you go to Switzerland, Austria, Germany, you got to put a little spark of energy into these values or ideas of value. And I really enjoy this working with people from the UK or the US, that they are, of course, this is us. I know what this us is and what it means and how I can embody it and what makes sense to me in the company. I really enjoy that.
I think it's just the creative freedom that the different countries are brought up with. I know that
100%.
I know that I see that in a lot of the mindsets of the different people that I speak to, depending on where they're from. It will show, depending on whether they are someone who managed to step out that box or not, which I assume is what you're trying to get your clients and the people that you work with to do, is simply just step out of that box. I see that myself a lot. It's really difficult to be an entrepreneur with that kind of upbringing and mindset instilled into you.
100%. Well, but going back to your services that you do, what I'm always interested in is whether it's storytelling in different forms on social media or in a podcast. What do you, or how is the conversation with your clients when it comes to what success means. Because a podcast, as you mentioned, it has to grow, it has to evolve, depending on your industry, I guess. Sometimes a couple of hundred listeners, if you get the right ones, can be fantastic. If you aim for a wider audience, you need to up their numbers big time. So when and how do you define concrete goals for a company podcast project?
It is it's very challenging to allow a number to get into one of our clients' heads because you don't know when you're going to reach that. You don't know. I find also at the beginning with podcasting, when you've just launched one, it's a lot of learning. It's a lot of trial and error as well to figure out what works, not only with your audience, but with you, because what works best with the host and that topic and that content is going to resonate most with the audience.
Yeah.
So I really want to root this idea of success in the hosts themselves and the people that are producing the podcast themselves. It's about, look at how many, if we want to start with a goal, how many episodes do you want to release? Like, what a number of episodes will you release where you think, wow, I've really got this thing up and running? Like, at what point do you think you'll feel comfortable doing it? What is your goal with that? Because it's at that point where you look at the audience and whatever number it is, it might not be, if you guessed that it would be 10,000 by then, it might not be that amount, but it will still be a considerable amount. I want them to start with zero and realize that the reason that they're doing this is to gain some sort of an audience. It doesn't matter what size they are at the beginning, because as long as you do have that stable growth, if you are seeing the numbers, eventually, even at the beginning, they might go up and down like a roller coaster. But when you do eventually start seeing that stable growth, that is success. When you can see that what I've tried, what I'm saying and what I'm talking about is working because it is increasing every month, that's success. Success is not that end number, because you're going to get to that number and you're going to keep growing after that. And it will take it might take longer or it might take quicker for you to get to that number. So I think a number in terms of your audience size is not the best compass and North Star for you to follow, but the consistency that you're doing it with, the consistency of the growth in your audience as well, that's important. So yeah, success is once you feel like, oh, I feel like I have the hang of what I'm doing and I feel like it's working because the numbers say this. And the reason the numbers are working is because I'm being consistent and I'm doing everything I need to do and being comfortable with it.
Yeah, 100%. To me personally, producing and also hosting podcasts, to me, or one of my learnings is I also teach at a university in Berlin for marketing and design. And there is a big similarity with podcasting, meaning the more I share, the more I gain. It's really weird, but it's I mean, it's also an old saying that I can't remember right now, but it's really, if you go back to it and if you prepare the content in a way to share it with an audience, you have to go over it 2 times, 3 times, think of analogies, images, maybe even with words, a story attached to it. So really it made me personally, even with a lot of experience in my field, it made me grow so much and made me so much better in what I do, just talking about it and reflecting on it. And I even have this monologue episodes where I think of something or do a case study. And this really helped me so much with my actual job, which is something that I always tell people who think about starting a podcast. And even if you're a bigger company, you can also use it internally to give everyone a voice, come together as a team. I mean, you know all of this, but this was really an effect I didn't plan ahead. I never thought of, hey, this is what maybe happens to me. I wasn't aware that it makes me better at what I do, just talking about it regularly, but it actually does big time. So this is
it's a massive part of it. I think that's the same with success in terms of no matter what you're doing, whether it's podcasts or anything else, you need to root the success in not some monetary thing ahead of you that you can't see, but in how you feel in the moment. That's how you'll reach it. And you need to root the success in yourself and how you're feeling how you're feeling while you're doing it, how you feel like, how successful you feel like you are based on your emotions during that time. And I always say that if you think about it, realistically, if you were sitting in a room right now, or if you were standing in a classroom, or you're standing in a room and there's 20 people sitting there, and you've said something, you've provided some education, there's 20 people in the room sitting there, and they all get up and clap and they say, you know what, that's really good, you really helped me. Would you feel good? Would you feel like that was a success?
100%. Yes.
And that if so, 20 people listen to your episode, then yeah, that was a success. And eventually you might have some unrealistic number like 3,000 in your head. But even if 100 or 80 or 50 people sat in that room and all clapped and said, you know what, that was really valuable for me. Thanks. You helped me. I'll be here for the next one. Then
100%.
You'd feel really good about yourself. Even when one person comes up to you on the street and you have a conversation, they say, oh, that was a really nice conversation. Like me and you, us just having this conversation. If I help you and you help me, or I enjoy the conversation or you enjoy the conversation, we go away, then that's what's most important. Did we even enjoy it ourselves? Who is listening to it? At this moment in time, we don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Nikita, this is a surprisingly romantic answer that I completely share, because it's about emotion and feeling and being in the moment, and the feeling of success, even though it's about your company and business and something that is very easy measurable, focusing on the important things. And this brings me to my last big topic that I want to talk to you about, because you can't have a podcast conversation about business these days without talking about the big two letters, AI. How do you feel AI? What does it do to the podcasting industry, and what do you make of it?
I think it is helping the podcast industry. I'm not sure if you've seen, I've seen so many things about these fake podcast episodes created by AI. Have you listened to any of them?
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, the ones I listened to, there was a little fake Joe Rogan episode.
Yeah,
which I pretty frequently listen to him, because he has everyone on. So whoever you want to investigate or learn more about, you end up with Joe Rogan. So I know him pretty well, and not from the get-go, but from the overall thing, it was weird. He either would have had a bad day or it's fake. So I think, we're all still fine-tuning our antennas for, is this fake? Is this AI? Is this deep fake? Whatever. But to me, this was impressive in terms of technology, but in terms of conversation, 100%. It was not that impressive, because it wasn't. It didn't have the surprising elements or the courage of some of the questions.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
The humanity in it. I had listened to those and I thought, this is so impressive what technology could do. Like, this is so impressive what technology can do. But then I realized this is just not sustainable. This will never last. Like, our conversations and what we bring to the conversations as humans, and the emotion and the feeling in our voices and the stories we have of our own personal experiences, AI will never be able to do that. The stories that we have, podcasting is storytelling, and AIs can't share stories in that same way, with that same emotion that we can ourselves. And stories and emotion and authenticity is what resonates with people the most. So I know that I can really see the threat in other industries, but in the podcasting industry, which is all based on human connection, AI can't replicate that. We've all seen movies, but it's not the same. What's happening in reality? It's just not the same.
So I think there are. Well, I would only make a few exceptions. I 100% agree with you when it comes to authenticity and the humanity in conversations. I think there are some podcasts like news podcasts. If you just, I mean, I can't think of an American or English podcast format. In Germany, you have the Presseschau, which is a guy with a professionally trained voice reads you just the headlines of the day. It's like a 5-minute thing to really scroll the news very fast in the morning. Maybe he can be worried because this is about fast information, but this is a very functional podcast. This is not a creative podcast. It's not a interactive human podcast. It's just a very functional thing. It's like AI and text. I can generate short news flash. There's been an accident on Highway 66. Delays for 30 minutes. Okay, that's fine. I don't need a guy or a woman to write that. That's fine from the machine. But everything other than that, I 100% agree that there's no we always say flesh on the bone. If you know what I mean.
I get what you mean completely. It's very two-dimensional. Yeah.
And I remember these days, I think we had this in an episode before, but I have to retell this because to me, again, coming back to music, there's tons of AI that can produce a combination of sounds that sound like a song or music. And this is old, actually. I've been to tech conferences like 8 years ago or something, and they all started the same. There was this one guy, ooh, look at this. There is an abstract Dadaistic poem, and one of them is written by humans, real Dadaists, and the other one is written by a machine. And then you listen to two little, one was 12-tonal music, neoclassic, this weird atonal stuff. It sounds really off, by an orchestra, written by a human, very innovative at the time. And then you have random computer generated noises, and he's always like, look at the result, it sounds the same. And really, this lack of understanding what art and creativity and human means shocked me even back then. I mean, you don't listen to a music or you don't read a story to get the facts, otherwise books wouldn't work, storytelling itself wouldn't work. Just give me the bullet points of that thriller. Someone dead, these are the clues, they solved it, I'm done, thank you, I don't need to watch. This is not what it's about at all, I think. So again, and especially I feel it especially in music, and I know the music industry is suffering and there's a lot of arguments that are quite the opposite, but I think there's nothing that can replace especially live music, because if you see someone playing an instrument at the edge of their abilities, this does something, even without the sound. Just looking at the person and seeing how much they give into it to create this sound, that's 100% not the same experience. Just listening to something.
Content is about the human behind it. It's not about the content. It's about the fact that it's a human delivering it and it means something because it's a human behind it. Like, I can relate to the music example that you're giving because I paint a lot. Like, I do a lot of art.
Nice.
And it's something that I've always done since I was little, and probably it was always my dream to be an artist. Still is probably, but we have a difficult relationship right now. Me and art.
That's okay.
I'm having like an artistic block with my art at the moment. But when I think of it in terms of this, in terms of AI, I think to myself, these artists and even me, when I do start, selling a lot of my art in the future, I want the art to live on. But realistically, it's not the art that lives on, it's me inside the art that lives on. All these artists that you hear about, their paintings, they might have names, but you'd say Picasso painted this. Like, you don't say this painting is called this and not mention the artist. And the artist's story, and the hardship that he went through and what it took to create this painting, and that's what gives it meaning, the human behind it. Even this music you're talking about, seeing that person playing the instrument, the music is amazing, yes, but the music is amazing because it's that person that did it with their hands and fingers and soul and brain and creativity.
100%.
That's what makes it amazing. And AI will never, ever be able to replicate that.
Can't agree more. I mean, this is to put it in a very easy image. I think this is why cover bands are not famous, or let alone cool. Yeah, of course, if it's just about the doing the thing, no matter who did it or how it's done, cover bands would be fantastic and amazing, and they would have all the fans. It's just not about that. Yeah, 100%.
It's not like you can show your talent, but
Yeah.
they show they're talented, and that's how they then can go on to show their real creativity by creating their own things. And maybe it's a stepping stone to getting there.
I'm not meaning to shit on cover bands, but it's a good step.
I agree with you, but it's it's the perfect analogy. It's the perfect one.
Well, first of all, super interested about your art. Maybe for another conversation. But yeah, AI. Yeah, that's a good. I love that you're optimistic about it, and I completely share your approach about the human behind it, the humanity within it, and the importance of this. Nikita, I have one last question for you for this enlightening episode, which has been really fun. I have a couple of questions I usually ask at the end of the episode, but since you gave a cool recommendation already at the beginning with the Hidden Brain podcast, I wondered if there are, generally speaking, if there has been some kind of conversation in a movie, in a book, in real life, in a podcast that has inspired you over the last days or weeks that you can recommend to us.
I speak for most of my day, so it's difficult to just pick one. But I would say this conversation has definitely inspired me. But I would say I was having a conversation with my friend, and she was saying, "Oh, I need to write more," because she likes writing books, and she's really good at writing books. She's really good at writing poems. And I was saying, "Oh, I need to create more art because that's what I'm good at." And then we were talking about all these artists and, creatives that are always in this certain, and when we felt the most to create is when we're in this certain emotional state, whether it's sadness or something like that. But when you're in a heightened emotional state, it's easier to create because it's a form of expression. And then we were saying, well, how are we going to get past this? Because if we're just, happily, peacefully living our lives, how are we going to move past that? And we came to the conclusion that really and truly can't stay in that kind of a state, a heightened emotional state all the time. So we just have to be really intentional about whatever it is that we want to put our mind to or create.
Yes.
It's just about being intentional and setting up a structure, some sort of structure. Obviously, creatives don't like structure, but it is, unfortunately, if you want to do it consistently, it's the only way that it can be done is to intentionally do this, intentionally create, whether it's podcasts or art, or because, really and truly the feeling won't come to you every day. It's not how it works. So
yeah. And otherwise you end up in this spiral of being addicted to drama and emotional roller coasters, which a lot of people, even maybe young artists or still untamed artists, unexperienced artists, so to speak, still hunt down and still think this is really
that's why there's like a drug culture.
Romantic. Yeah,
there's like a drug culture in a lot of creatives. So we're talking 100%. About that as well. But yeah, that was my most inspirational conversation recently.
That is very good. Thank you for sharing. And this is something I think everyone listening to this can also take away with it, because no matter if it's music or art or writing or even, as we mentioned, even podcasting, it's a big rush if you do it for the first couple of times, and then it's going to slowly wear off. And then what do? Then how do you hype yourself up? And just by really, in my experience, giving into the process, really just being in the moment and really giving the best you can do at this moment into the conversation, it's always going to be exciting, especially in real human conversations, because you never know what happens. Yeah. Fantastic, Nikita. Well, these are all my questions for today. Thank you so much for bringing your joy for the work and your experiences and your knowledge to this. Thanks for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I really, really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did too. I hope everyone listening did and maybe got something out of it, even if it was just like a laugh or a giggle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Sweet people, that's a wrap. Thank you, Nikita, for being on the show and sharing your knowledge, your experiences, your insights on brand podcasting. I think we really learned a lot today on how to craft engaging narratives and really connect with audiences in a meaningful way. I took away a lot from this conversation. Even though I'm podcasting for years now, it's always good to check back in with someone with a different perspective, different experiences, and I hope you get inspired to try some audio branding for your company, for your ideas. As always, if you're looking for more info on our guest, make sure to check the show notes. There's lots more to learn, to read about and from Nikita. And if you want to work on your brand building, design, storytelling, make sure to visit sweetspot-studio.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Sweetspot Podcast. And I'll be back with another episode and another guest soon. Till then, see you on the sweet side.
This podcast is produced by Sweetspot Studio. New episodes each week, wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you enjoyed the show, leave a rating and subscribe to never miss an episode. Find out more at sweetspot-studio.com.